All right, so today we're going to be in John chapter 6, and just kind of share the process of how I got here. I wasn't planning on preaching this until probably Tuesday or so, and what I was doing is, well, like we talked about, we're in the middle of August, so you're just like, okay, come on, let's and we know we have the lake next week, so we're excited about that. And then Labor Day, and then we kind of gear things back up, right? And so I've been thinking about some of that, and I was looking at just some different words of Jesus, and what my thought process is I think sometimes in our culture today, whenever you talk about Jesus, we think of Jesus as kind of this just really nice guy who was someone who would just come up and he'd grab you around the shoulder. He'd give you a word of encouragement, right? He was kind of just a kind, gentle person that just uplifted your spirits all the time, because he loved everyone, right? And we've put a lot of emphasis on that. We just need to love everyone, and we just need to be nice and kind, just like Jesus was. Now, there's truth to that. I believe Jesus was loving. I believe he was kind. However, I also believe they nailed him on a cross. You don't nail a lot of just nice and kind people to a cross if they're just being nice and kind. So there was something else about Jesus, right? and there's actually a lot of very harsh words that Jesus says. In fact, a lot harsher than what are coming from most pulpits today, right? That you're like, whoa, that's kind of offensive, right? That's not really all that kind. But so Jesus is a more complicated figure, if you will, than sometimes we in our culture have made him out to be. And so I was thinking about that and just kind of starting to look, and I stumbled across John 6. And John 6 has a couple of the most well-known miracles of Jesus. And I started thinking about it. How often, or have I ever actually just read through all of John 6, in kind of intentionally, because it all goes together. It's within about a 24-hour period. And the answer is no, because it's 70 verses long. So it's like, no, I mean, I'm sure I've read through it, but you don't preach that way. You can't, that's very difficult to preach 70 verses. In fact, you're all panicking that I'm going to read all 70 verses. Like, do you know how many page turns that is? But I what really jumped out to me is what this teaches us about Jesus, and how quickly people's perception of Jesus, how quickly it changed, and you start seeing in this passage where people started to become uncomfortable with Jesus. And as we discuss and go through John chapter 6 today, I want you to start thinking about the question, what do you believe about Jesus? Who do you believe Jesus is? And most importantly, why do you believe in Jesus? So let's go into John chapter 6. All right, so we have different, we're gonna kind of hit the highlights here. So we'll start out with John chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. It says, sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that's the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside, sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for those people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. All right, so let's stop there. We're not going to read about the miracle. We'll kind of hit on it, but this is the feeding of the 5,000. Okay, So let's set up what's going on. And there's a couple things that just kind of you don't even really think about. But so Jesus, it specifically says this was the Jewish Passover festival was near. So you're at the Passover. All the big stuff with Jesus happened around Passover, right? Because that was a direct connection to Jesus being the Messiah. He was fulfilling what we have in the Old Testament. The Passover was when God passed over the houses of the slaves in Egypt because they shed the blood of the lamb, right? And so all of that imagery, all of that spiritual connection, what the Passover was a powerful celebration because it was when God brought his redemption. He brought the people out of slavery. He gave them new life, right? Well, Jesus is now going to be the Lamb of God, right? And so there's a direct connection there. So this is at that time. It's not right on Passover, but that is all happening. And Jesus has just been performing lots of miracles, lots of healing. And so people were excited. And it says that the people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. So they're kind of like, this is cool. You know, I just saw a lame guy get up and walk. You know, that person who's had a nagging cough now doesn't. You know, whatever it is, right? We don't know, but we know that Jesus was healing and that people were starting to get intrigued. And they were kind of like, man, this guy's kind of cool. But they liked it because of what Jesus was doing and the power that he was showing. But they really didn't know who Jesus was yet. Right? But they're following him. And I love the picture. They get to the mountainside, and you kind of get this picture that the disciples are there, which there were probably more than just the 12 at this time. But they're all kind of there, and then they look behind them and they just see this line of people that are coming up. And not just because he has the same name as me, but poor Philip, right? You're sitting there and Jesus just singles you out. Don't you know, why is it always me, right? Why are you asking me this question? I don't know the answer, right? Now the answer is always, you just answer Jesus, right? That's the good Sunday school answer. But then at that time, that wasn't necessarily what they thought the answer would be. And so Jesus says, what are we going to do? Where are we going to find bread for these people to eat? And Philip's like, are you kidding me? It's like it would take a lifetime's wages to do that. And then it says something also. He said he asked him this because he already had in mind what he was going to do. Right? So Jesus knew what was happening here. Right? This is a big moment. Jesus is going to use this to bring about a deep spiritual truth. Right? And so he's getting prepared for that. And poor Philip is the person who has to answer incorrectly, right? And so then you have this wonderful miracle. And I love the feeding of the 5,000. You remember they like, does anyone have any food? And this one little kid says, well, I've got some loaves and fish. What is it? 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus says, all right, let's start passing it out. And imagine being there, right? Because what would happen is that the disciples would very quickly realize, whoa, what is happening here, right? I just reach in the basket and it just keeps coming out, right? The people with the good seats, the VIPs, they would also be seeing this. But the people in the cheap seats, those way in the back, they probably didn't know exactly what was going on, and all of a sudden this food is getting, and they're like, hey, this is great, free lunch, but then the whispers would have been starting, right? And it'd be like, wait, where was all this food? Where did it all come from? Did they have it hidden behind the stage? Like you can do you can convince people of a lot of things, right? Like, in the services where we handle snakes, I always make sure they're a little gassed so they don't move too quick, right? I mean, I'm brave, but I'm not stupid, And, so there's lots of things you can do to kind of manipulate, right? And don't you know, those conversations were kind of going on. It's like, how did this happen? What is going on? Who is this guy? Right? And trying to figure out what's happening. And I just can imagine the murmurs and the conversations that they're having as they're eating their fill, right? And getting full, which in that day and time, that wasn't always a guarantee, right? Sometimes you ate what you could. We're kind of blessed. We can eat our full whenever we want to, right? So it was this amazing moment. So now their stomachs are full. They're experiencing what is an unbelievable miracle, whether they fully understand it or not. But it does start to register, and it starts to click. And they're like, you know what? We kind of like this guy. This guy is powerful. He can heal us when we're sick, and he makes sure our stomachs are full. So what do they want to do? It says in verse 14, it says, after the people saw the signs Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who has come into the world. Jesus, knowing they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. All right, so let's stop there for a moment. So you have this realization that the people go, okay, there's something about this guy. Let's make him king. Because look at what he's doing for us. Right? He heals us. He's powerful. He makes sure we have enough to eat. We've been trying to figure out how to get rid of the Romans, things like that. Hey, we can't do it on our own. This guy probably could do it. And he'll take care of us while we're at it, while he's at it. So they wanted to come start making him king. It's like they start getting the political super PAC together, right? Let's start getting funds for the campaign. We're going to get rid of King Herod. We're going to install this Jesus guy because there's something godly about him, right? God's providing. God clearly sent him, and he's going to fill our bellies, and he's going to cure us. Right? How awesome. So they had a legitimate understanding of the power of Jesus, but they didn't really know who Jesus was. Right? But it's very important to know that after that miracle, people wanted to make him king. Right? Then Jesus retreats up to the mountainside, spends some time alone, and you have the next few verses talk about Jesus walking on water. This, again, is very interesting, and it's debated in John and seminary and theological, but it's really interesting because something miraculous happens here other than Jesus just walking on the water. So the disciples get in the boat, and they're kind of going to another area, and all of a sudden they see a figure. Well, they know it can't be Jesus because Jesus went up the mountainside. He didn't walk all the way around, and he wouldn't have physically had time to walk all the way around, right? And so that's why they didn't recognize him. It says they didn't recognize him walking on the water because it didn't make sense. There's no way he could be here. And usually you don't see people walking on water. And I love how that conversation is like, what is that? Who is that? Like, is he really walking on water? And then I love to think of, because it talks about how the crowds then caught up to them. And so you start relaying what you have seen. Hey, we saw this guy walking on water. Well, no, he was probably just on the beach. No, it was on the water. Well, you probably just, were a little delirious, right? It was probably raining a little bit. Maybe you had too many loaves and fishes, right? But those conversations would have been happening. And then Scripture even talks about how the people didn't understand how Jesus could have gotten there. So there's this mystery really starting to build that all supports the fact that Jesus, there's something special about this guy. that he's not just a normal prophet. He's doing something pretty powerful. And so then in verse 25, things start to turn. It says, when they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, Rabbi, when did you get here? Jesus answered, very truly, I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him God the Father has placed his seal of approval. So he's basically saying, you're interested in me because, not because I'm the Messiah, right? But because I filled your belly. Right? That's kind of what's driving this. And he says, then they ask him, what must we do to the works that God requires? And Jesus answered, the work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. So they ask him, what sign then will you give that we may see and believe you? What will you do? Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written. He gave them bread from heaven to eat. Remember, God sent the manna every day. And so that was a sign that God was taking care of them and that they were God's people. So Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that came down from heaven and gives life to the world. Sir, they said, always give us this bread. Then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. All right. Do you ever have a moment where you're listening to somebody, and maybe it's like this every Sunday for you, that you're kind of listening, but the words are just, going in the head and everything. But then you say something. There's a phrase or something in it, and it's like, whoa, what did he just say? Right? Was I paying attention? Did he really say that? Yeah, what did he mean by that? Right? We've all had that moment, right? Well, when Jesus gets to this point, things escalate. There's in the Gospel of John, there's what are called the I am statements. And the word I am is ego eimi in Greek. And it's the same word for God in the Old Testament, Yahweh, which was never spoken. It would, as the Jewish people, as they read the Torah, the Old Testament, they will actually either skip that word or they will say Adonai or something like that. It's a word that's not even spoken, right? It's just that holy. It's kind of representing, if you remember, this goes back to Moses at the burning bush, right? That I am who I am. And so Jesus, in John uses it quite a bit, the I am statements. And so when Jesus says, I am the bread of life, that would have turned some heads. It's like, you're not supposed to use that word, and you're connecting it to yourself. What are you doing? Right? Because they just said the sign of manna from heaven, of bread from heaven, was a sign that God was with them, that God had called them and chosen them, and that was going to be with them. And Jesus is saying, now I am that bread. Right? So that's a huge, huge statement. And it starts to cause some problems. Because the people were really happy whenever Jesus was just filling their belly and giving them some entertainment with the healing, right? But now he's starting to change things. He's starting to challenge their understanding. And so we get to verse 41. At this, the Jews there began to grumble about him because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. They said, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, I came down from heaven? Right? So you see the problem that's happening. It's like, we know this guy. He's just a normal guy, right? And he's actually claiming that God sent him and that he came from heaven, just as the manna came from heaven, and now he has come from heaven? Right? That this is starting to cause some problems. It's all good when Jesus fits our expectation and where he's meeting our needs. But then whenever he starts making us a little uncomfortable, do we still believe in him? Because remember, Jesus just said that the work of God is this, to believe the one he has sent. Right? So it is about who do you believe, and what is that belief based in? Is it based in what Jesus does or who he is? And there's a huge difference. So then we continue, verse 60. So they've now been having arguments. Jesus uses some theological terminology, and he says, no, you will have to eat my flesh, right? This is language that's happening there is symbolic, but he is hammering the point home that no, I am the bread of life. And people start getting pretty irritated. Verse 60, on hearing it, many of his disciples said, this is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, does this offend you? Then what if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you, they are full of the Spirit and life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them did not believe and who would betray him. He went on to say, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled them. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. You do not want to leave too, do you? Jesus asked the 12. Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. All right, so what's happening here, as you can tell, and this isn't with the religious leaders. I'm sure there were some religious leaders there. But these are from just some of the people who had been following and supporting. It actually uses the term disciples. So that kind of indicates that there was a group that at one time was larger than the 12. The 12 were the ones he specifically called. We know that. But there would have been others that would have been following along. Right? And all of a sudden, they leave. Now remember, it's so vital to know the context. 24 hours before, they were wanting him to be king by force. Right? And now they're walking away. And many walked away. Right? And Jesus looks to the 12 and says, are you going to walk away as well? And Peter, who, sometimes, just saying what you think and not necessarily having to be eloquent or anything like that is a benefit. And that's Peter. He's just like, well, we don't know who else to follow, and we've seen enough. We believe that you're something special. We believe you're the Holy One of God. Now, even Peter didn't fully understand what that meant. But what Peter was saying is, we believe in you, and we're going to keep believing in you no matter what. And I really started thinking about this because it shows a difference. Do we believe in Jesus because of the things he does? Or do we believe in him because he is the Son of God? Right? Because eventually, the miracles started to slow down. And they started to stop. He wasn't healing everyone. Guess what? They were going to get hungry again. And Jesus wasn't going to bippity boppity boo and give them food. Right? So do you still believe in Jesus when your stomach's not full and the miracles aren't happening? Right? And to put that in a context for us, religion is different than faith and is different in believing in Jesus. What true Christianity is, it is not a religion. It is a relationship with Jesus Christ, right? And because if we view it as a religion, that means when that religion quits meeting our expectations or meeting our needs, then we start looking around saying, well, there's another one. That one looks like it fits me a little bit better, right? So it can be easy to say, I'll just start doing that. We also, I think as a church, just in general, we have to be careful because the question becomes, why do you believe in Jesus? Is it because your parents dragged you to church and then you kind of, this isn't too bad, and that just becomes the expectation, well, that's what I'm supposed to do as well, so we're just going to do it. Okay, that's good. I'm glad you're here, right? But is that the only reason? Just because, well, this is what I've been told. Or, do we come so that we can experience goosebumps because the music is really good and it kind of feels good to be with some nice people? Right? None of this stuff is bad, by the way. But if the only reason that you come to church and the only reason that you believe in Jesus is because every once in a while there's some really powerful worship that happens, what about when the worship isn't as powerful? Right? Maybe you believe in Jesus because you've experienced some sort of a miracle, that you've been healed or someone that you know has been healed. I believe that stuff still does happen. I think it's not all the time, because miracles by kind of definition don't happen all the time, right? But if that's why you believe in Jesus, then you have to start questioning, well, what happens when the miracle doesn't come, right? Whenever I still pray and I ask for the miracle and it doesn't come, do you still believe in Jesus? I think it's also important for us to know and to think about this question now, because frankly, it's been pretty easy to be a Christian in all of our lives, right? In fact, everyone here has lived in the best time to be alive as far as of how many opportunities we have, of how blessed we are. And this is not to minimize. I know everyone in here has gone through difficult times and has struggled with money and all of those things. But historically speaking, we are way better off than any other people in history, right? And so it's been kind of easy. Well, what if things start to change, right? What if it's not as easy to be a Christian? There are places right now in the world that standing up and saying you're a Christian has major consequences, right? And we're living in a changing time. From a time where the majority of people believed in God and went to church to now that is starting to switch. Now, does that mean that all of a sudden there's going to be persecution break out everywhere? It doesn't mean that. But it does mean it's a little bit more challenging, right? That saying that you believe in Jesus is a little bit tougher. And I think it's important for us to start asking that question now. Why did we believe in Jesus? Is it because of the friends we make at church? Is it because the pastor lets us out before the Cowboys kick off because he wants to go watch the Cowboys? Is it because the music's great? Is it because it has a great children's program? Is it because it has a beautiful building? All of these things that all of our churches we do, right? But is that why we believe in Jesus? Because if it is, all of that can be taken away. And then, if you haven't thought about it, it's pretty easy to say, whoa, I don't want to deal with that anymore. But if you've chosen to believe because he is the bread of life, he is the Son of God, that life is found in him and him alone, even if it makes your life harder. But true life is only found in him. And the only way we'll be able to experience joy and peace in this life is by believing in him. Not believing in all the other things. Those can be great, but it better be about believing in him, or we'll find ourselves walking away. I encourage you to put your trust in him and him alone. Engage in all the other things. Be thankful for those wonderful times of worship. Be thankful for experiencing the fellowship that comes from within a church and all those things. But that cannot be why you believe in him. You believe in him because he is the one true God, because he is the bread of life. Let's go to him in prayer.